Thank you, Mary. If you all thought last week was weird with the priestly robes, you are in for a treat today. We are going to talk about altars, candles, incense, and all that religious stuff. Now, we're in the third of a sermon series on keeping church weird, and I tried to ease you into the waters 2 weeks ago by talking about group singing or communal singing. Last week we met Aaron, the first priest of the Hebrew tribe, and his sons who were being properly clothed before they could enter the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, the holy place where they believe that you physically come into contact with God. So today, it's getting really weird as we get down to the business of what happens inside the tent, what priests do, and why they do it. Now, the scripture today is all about religious stuff. There's a lot of symbols in the passage that Mary just read. And I brought some stuff with me today. This is what our modern religious symbols look like. This is about 1/6 or 1/8 of my required reading from my seminary education, the preparation of 3 years that I went through to stand in this pulpit. Now, I actually only brought a few of the practical books. I left all the deeply theological ones at home, so if you're interested, see me later. But I have books on pilgrimage, where we should go in order to be closer to God. I have books on prayer, how to pray, when to pray, what parts of your body to use to pray. I have books on spiritual direction and holy listening, listening at Golgotha, listening to the Spirit within you. There's even books written by monks from the beginning of time till today about how we should order our lives, what we should do with our daily routines. And if you look outside the Christian tradition, there are also a ton of books about how to meditate, how to center, how to balance. And this is just a sampling. This is just a start of all the stuff that we're asked to bring in order to prepare to become priests and pastors. Part of studying to become a pastor is about spirituality, though, not just about religious stuff. We're asked to do spirituality in school. They put us into small groups that meet weekly so we can talk about how it is with our soul, a question that John Wesley used to ask all of his small meeting groups every time they got together once a week. And so we talked about how it was with our soul. We were encouraged to make gratitude jars. I've shown you that before. Little things to write what I'm thankful for each week, each day. We were even encouraged to use some ancient symbols and methods for prayer. We're all supposed to journal, so we bought a variety of beautiful and colorful books to get us doing the business of spirituality. But for me, none of this stuff focused on the why. It was all the what. It was all what we were supposed to be doing. And for me, that shift to the why is what is really exciting and what's really interesting about our passage today. Now, some scholars believe that the details that Mary just read to you are described in so many minute details because they are all ways of pointing towards the person of Jesus Christ that would come many centuries later. There are chapters and chapters in Exodus describing how to build a tent of meeting, the exterior courtyard, the interior holy of holies. The passage she read today is about the golden altar, the incense altar. It's a little 1 by 1 by 3 cubit altar. And some people think the one symbolizes the unity that we have through Christ in God. Now, first century Roman citizens, that was most of the people in the Middle Eastern part of the world, were asked to burn incense to the emperor as part of the imperial cult. Emperors in that day were akin to gods, and so the people were all asked to offer incense as a sacrifice to show their allegiance to the emperor. Early Christians refused to do that, one thing that led to some of their persecution, and so they instead chose to redefine incense. They began burning it in their religious ceremonies as a way to pledge allegiance to a different type of God. It was a subversive act, actually, in the beginning, and sometimes we don't think about the cheekiness of how it all began when we light candles in church on Sunday mornings. Their practices back then were not unlike the subversive practices of some teens and young adults today, who practically bathed themselves in patchouli or tea tree oil in order to remind the society that they are different. They are nonconformist. But for me, a bath and patchouli, getting certain types of tattoos, or even wearing certain fashion styles like skinny jeans, is just another way of conforming. It's just another way of belonging, of claiming an identity. And so some of the symbols that we're talking about today are ways of us claiming our ancient identity as Christians. Back to the altar. You may have noticed Mary said there were 4 horns on this incense altar, poles to carry it since the people were very mobile back then. But these horns kind of surprised me, and I did a little research this week. They were thought to point in different directions, so symbolizing the fact that Jesus' ministry in years to come would spread to all 4 corners of the earth. Now these scholars who try to bring Jesus back thousands of years and implement him onto an ancient tradition are a group of respected theologians. But there's a whole other group of theologians who completely disagree with them. And isn't that what religion is always about? It's always about people arguing over things that seem not very important. And I found a book this week, An Altar in the World by Barbara Brown Taylor. She was a minister in parish ministry for 15 years, and she left the church in a very public way, writing a book called Leaving Church to become a professor. And this is what she had to say. If you are tired of arguing about religion, tired of reading about spirituality, tired of talking about things that matter without doing a single thing that matters yourself, then read the pages of this book. My hope is that by reading them, you will help to recognize some of the altars in your world, ordinary-looking places where human beings have met and may continue to meet up with the divine, more than sometimes people call God. The whole book is about making the ordinary holy, about making the little encounters that you have in your daily life opportunities to both experience and express whatever faith, whatever realization, whatever encounter of God that you've experienced in your life. Now, a few weeks ago, just after our Camp Noah summer program for children, I asked each person in church on that Sunday morning to write what they cling to in times of trouble on little construction paper arcs. And we had a big whiteboard here, and people came forward and put their arcs on the board. I really enjoyed reading what you wrote, and it seemed to me, in thinking about it, that all of your responses were altars in some way. Some of our altars are places, like the mountains, or a particular lake or place in the state. Others listed people, like friends or spouses or children, and still others listed activities like prayer or making music or going on hikes. And I submit to you this morning that these are some of your altars. These are the places and the people and the things that you do in order to meet God in a real and tangible way in your lives. There's no need for candles and incense and altars and all that stuff, but there's just a state of heart, a state of mind, an openness and an awareness of God's presence to you and your presence to God. That's all that's necessary. I will say, though, in the line of keeping church weird, there is a value in some of this stuff, all of it, all of the candles and altars and incense and stuff. The ancient Aaronic priests were instructed to light candles and lamps filled with pure olive oil. They were to pray on behalf of their community. They were paid to pray, if you will, and they had to do it every day, twice a day. Keep the lamps burning, keep the incense burning, keep the prayers going. This reminded me of a verse in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, pray without ceasing. Some of you may know it. That gave me a lot of pause and puzzle when I was in seminary because I was really busy reading and writing and doing a lot of spiritual stuff. And I didn't always find time to pray. Heck, after the flood, it seemed even harder to find a moment to pray with all the recovery and meetings and pastoral care that need to happen. And I thought the only way to pray without ceasing is to make everything that I do a prayer. That's an idea that was suggested back in ancient times, but got lost somewhere along the way. Have you ever thought that washing dishes could be prayer? or cutting the grass, or going grocery shopping, or holding a child in your arms who's fallen. Everything that you do, every breath that you take, every moment in your life is an opportunity to invite the Spirit into the center of your being, an opportunity to share the Spirit that you sense with everyone else around you. Barbara Brown said something pretty powerful about prayer later in her book. She said, "Brother David Steindl-Rast, an Austrian Benedictine monk, was the first person to tell me that prayer is not the same as prayers. Prayers are important," he said. "Saying psalms in the morning is a good way to head into the day more prayerfully. So is going to church, where I can add my voice to those of a whole congregation, aiming to woo God's ears with their ancient, beautiful cadences. Still, prayer is more than saying set prayers at set times. Prayer, according to Brother David and many monks before him, is waking up to the presence of God, no matter where I am or what I'm doing. When I am fully alert to whatever or whoever is right in front of me, when I am electrically aware of the tremendous gift of being alive, when I am able to give myself wholly to the moment that I am in, then I am in prayer. Prayer is happening, and it is not necessarily something that I am doing. God is happening, and I am lucky enough to know that I am in the midst. It's not always about what we do. It's not even about our intention. It's happening all around us, and we're invited to be a part of it. Sometimes this stuff helps us drown out our confusion. It helps us simply get down to business. When I lived in Germany, I had a little sacred space. It was a corner table in my bedroom. There were a few candles on it, a few icons, some symbols that were important to me, like the butterfly or the growth spiral, symbols of transition, symbols of moving on. I was in a tough place in my life. I had lost a marriage, I had lost my job, my health was failing, and I had no idea why I was created or what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And so every night I would go to that little sacred space, and I would light all of those candles, and I would sit silently in front of the beauty that I had not created and just sense that presence. There were no prayers, there were no words, there were no thoughts. I was too empty and broken for all of that. There was just a rawness, an openness to say, "Come, Spirit, whatever you are, whatever you want, come." We spoke last week about the priesthood of all believers. I introduced you to the idea that you are all priests, even though you may not wear robes or tie-dyed t-shirts. And one job, the most important job that the priests have always had, is to pray. It's to pray on behalf of others, both those that you know and those that you don't know. If you don't know where to begin, I suggest starting with creating your own sacred space, whether that's a little space inside or a beautiful space outside, wherever you meet to connect, wherever you can come away and invite the Spirit to come. Barbara has a space like that, and I'd like to close my sermon today by sharing her thoughts on her sacred space. She claims that even though she was a minister for many years, she was a terrible failure at prayer. And she always, when asked about it, had religious, pious answers and invited other people to share their experiences so no one would notice that she didn't have a vibrant prayer life. It's kind of expected of ministers, and so she hid it well. But this is what she says. "Since I am a failure at prayer, I keep an altar in my room. It is really an old vanity made of rosewood with fancy scroll work on either side and an oval mirror with a small stack of drawers. At worst, I think of it as a piece of furniture that I offer to God as a substitute for my prayers. At best, I think of it as a portal that stays open whether I go through it or not. I keep some icons on it and a lot of candles. When people ask me to pray for them, I write their names on slips of paper and put them in a small brass box that sits in front of two paintings, one of Jesus, one of Mary. Most nights the altar just sits there, holding all of those pictures, wicks, and names. Then comes a night when I am in deep need, deep fear, deep thanks, or deep want, either for myself or for someone that I love. And I light every candle on that altar. Some are tall and thin, others are short and squat. Some smell like vanilla and others like sandric balsam. Some were gifts. I bought others for myself. When I am through, I sit back on my heels and try to take it all in. The mirror behind the candles doubles their glow. The icons catch the light, pitching it back and forth. I can see my reflection through the flames, though only dimly, since the mirror is an old one and has lost much of its shine. Prayer overtakes me there. I am utterly swamped by the presence of the holy. I would bend my head to the ground if I could take my eyes off the beauty. As it is, I do not even know for sure if I am breathing. The altar is giving me more life than I know how to ask for. I can no longer tell the difference between need, fear, thanks, and want. In this light, I see how they are all facets of the same sparkler. I see how they are all faces of the same love. This answer to my prayer is so far beyond my doing that I cannot find the words to forswear my own input. All I did was light the candles. Did God find me, or did I find God? Hush. The time for words.